Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. With the launch of Midnight Beta finally being out, a lot more players are getting a chance to dive into some of the different classes and class changes as part of the next expansion. With obviously a ton of players picking up the Devourer Demon Hunter spec, a void-themed range version of the Demon Hunter playstyle that kind of changes and flips the gameplay of the spec on its head. It's a class that doesn't have a lot of combat abilities, but it has some build variety. Whether you go for a strictly ranged damage build or like a melee hybrid using abilities where you rush in, weave in slashes and strikes, and then leap out back into range. Surprisingly, it's a ton of fun. I didn't think I would enjoy Ranged Demon Hunter as much as I did, but it actually has quite a lot of depth. Even though you don't have that many combat abilities to use as part of your day-to-day rotation, your talent build really does determine how you end up using a lot of those abilities, and in some cases it can even give it a lot more depth, which helps keep the gameplay loop incredibly fun. In this video, I wanted to do my overview of my first impressions of the Demon Hunter, but also go over some of the different builds that players are playing right now in the beta. Whether you want to try out the range build or the melee build, which players are giving a go right now, if you need some direction for Demon Hunter, this video is going to be the best for you. As always, if you guys want to see more regular midnight updates for all the different class changes, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. So before we dive into actual builds, which I am going to share in this video, I won't have like the actual import links down below, but I will show you like what the builds look like so you can copy them if you are in the beta and want to give this playstyle a go. There's a couple of variations of these builds, but there seems to be like a melee build and a range build, with the range build being right now, it seems like they're a little bit more popular. The Void of Demon Hunter has so many different void-themed abilities. Basically everything that is green has now become purple or blue for your playstyle. Even abilities like your Spectral Sight makes everything go blue. It still gives you the same effect where you can see enemies to the walls and enemies are highlighted, but it has this void appeal instead of this Legion-themed appeal about it. Even abilities like Imprison, instead of giving you a green prison around the target, it is now blue. So they basically just took the dial of the color schemes, they just changed it from one color to another. Devourer's main movement skill ability is a blink or shift. It allows you, it pretty much functions like blink. It allows you to move around in any area you want to. Normally the ability comes with a reticle on your cursor, so it basically teleports you to that location. What's cool about it is it actually has a lot of verticality around it, so if there's some spot that's, let's say it's really high up, as long as you can click it, you can usually reach it. So this can be really fun if you just looking to explore without a mount, or particularly inside of instances. There's also an opportunity for you to get out of bounds with this version of Demon Hunter, which could potentially be quite a lot of fun. But yeah, it's really enjoyable to just shift around all over the place, and it becomes really awesome and reactive when it comes to moving around in combat. Defensively, this spec has access to darkness as well as blur. Blur still is a very strong defensive ability, but you are missing an immunity like Havoc Demon Hunter, and nothing in your class or spec tree really gives you any more defensive value outside of blur, so this is going to be your only big defensive component. This is going to be something to consider when it comes to endgame content and placing your positioning correctly, where Havoc can actually get away with like temporary immunity with their version of blur. You won't have that opportunity as Devourer, so this means your positioning and damage output is going to be something to consider. The spec is also fully mid-range and mobile, as in you are going to be majority casting abilities from a distance like a mage, like a warlock, like a priest, but you have the full ability to move around as you're casting your basic consume ability. You can even double jump while the ability is active, and you'll be building up resources and then spending those resources against the target as you get yourself more bonuses, more damage output, and things like that. Finally, another thing I really want to show off very quickly is the new metamorphosis, which looks absolutely amazing. Instead of having a cooldown, you just transform into a demon once you have enough resources, and I love everything about it, from the wings, the glowy eyes, the tattoos, and just the overall aesthetic. You still get full ability to move around while casting, and some of your abilities that consume each transformed into Devourer, which simply just becomes a more potent version of it, but for the most part, which does become a more potent version of the same base ability, but for the most part it just opens up more opportunities and new abilities without necessarily changing the gameplay too much. From there though, we can start talking about some of the different builds that have been developing over on the beta so far. And it's hard to tell if this is going to be the meta builds going forward, but these are the two playstyles that I've seen players really lean into so far. So if you're looking for some guidance over in the beta, if you are playing it, this is more or less the ranged build. Of course, you can adjust the class challenge tree any way you want to. There are a couple of challenges that I probably am going to switch out, actually, because I don't think you really need additional parry. In this playstyle, you're primarily focusing on ranged abilities, and there's actually not a lot. You can see our bars. I only have my Consume, which is a builder, Reap, which is another builder that builds a couple other resources, nothing in my number 3, and then Void Ray as like my big spender. And this is the majority of the gameplay is going to be is 2 builders and a spender, which you'll use in single target, in an AoE. And this class does not have a lot of buttons for you to press, which at first made me a little worried because it felt kind of like this is so easy to play. It's almost like given a Augmentation Evoker type of a feel, where their actual damaging buttons, there's just not a lot of them. And they have like a whole new mechanic of buffing allies, but the actual damage rotation is really simplistic. And at first I was a little turned off by the simplicity of the Void Demon Hunter, Devourer. But then when you actually play it in dungeons and actually play it on bosses, you'd start to get the gameplay loop. It's a few abilities, but there's many talents to make those abilities more interesting and the combo off of each other. So it actually ends up being a whole package once you start picking up a few new talents. Technically, as a Demon Hunter, you should be using the ability of Soul Immolation as well as part of your basic rotation. It's an ability that does some light damage to yourself, while also generating new fury and shattering soul fragments, which can be used in order to, I guess, build up for a little bit of burst or immediate resources. However, I've seen a lot of Demon Hunters just go into spontaneous immolation, where casting abilities has a chance to activate soul immolation for 5 seconds anyway. So it's one less button for you to even press into or even use abilities for, which means you have even less buttons for you to press as part of your basic day-to-day rotation. And that is something that I found super unusual about this spec in particular, is just how little abilities you actually get to press with as part of your day-to-day combat. So this whole build is going to focus mostly around range damage and increasing your range damage abilities. It is going to lean heavily into the right-hand side of the tree, which is a Void Ray tree, as you're going to be using the Void Ray ability a lot, especially in AoE situations. And you're also going to be getting this cool combo of Eradicate after the Void form, or the Void Ray, which is also really fun, which makes your gameplay a little bit more exciting. You're also going to be building up for a big Void Metamorphosis and try to stay in it as much as possible. And with this build, you're going to be slamming Collapsing Stars at the targets over and over and over, which is pretty satisfying once you get to that point. And the longer you can stay in that form, the more damage you can do with those Collapsing Stars, which is really where the fun of the build comes from. So the base of the gameplay is going to be mostly you pressing Consume and Reap in order to consume souls around you. Then you go for Big Ibium, let it channel all the way through, and then you use that Reap combo in order to deal this additional cleave ability damage, which looks absolutely amazing. The visuals of this spec look insane, and that's really for the most part what your playstyle is going to be all about, until you have enough in order to be able to go into a Void Metamorphosis. When a Void Metamorphosis is available and you're ready to use some damage, you're immediately going to go for an Ibium since that gets reset, and then go for Continuous Reap. Here, you're just trying to spend and build resources as quickly as possible until you get as many Ibiums as you can in order to extend your duration within meta by slowing down how much resources you start to spend. Building even more souls until you generate another Collapsing Star, and once a star becomes available, this is the one when you're going to send it in order to deal as much damage as humanly possible. And it looks visually amazing. It's had guaranteed crit on top of it if you pick up your Apex talent, so it becomes really fun to play into, and allows you to play into this crit-based build, as there's even more crit scaling down the line through the Apex talents. But you are eventually going to end up popping out of meta, and then you're going to go back to I-beaming or Void Rain for the most part, reaping at the target and consuming when there's nothing else really going on. But in AoE content, you'll actually will notice that you're generating a lot of resources fairly rapidly, so you're able to use the Void Ray ability quite regularly. So this becomes like the bread and butter of your build for the most part, and it feels pretty satisfying to pull off altogether at the end of the day. The melee build of the Devourer, or like the melee hybrid build, is going to build up on this a little bit by investing to abilities that are more melee heavy. Specifically, Void Blade is now going to be an ability that deals more damage and now generates your resources. Void Blade is an ability that's like a ranged charge that allows you to rush into the enemy and get up close from a solid bit of distance, 35-yard range, so you can be pretty far away in order to close that gap immediately, which is pretty awesome. And now you're going to play into a combo build of Hungering Slash. After using abilities like the Hunt or Void Blade, basically any ability that lets you close the gap, you then can use the ability of Hungering Slash to cleave at enemies, doing a bunch of cosmic damage, ripping out enemy souls, which generates a lot of those resources. Then you could use Vengeful Retreat to deal additional cosmic damage to get back out into range. So you still get to play around in range, and this just gives you like the ability to swoop in, cleave, and get back into the range, which is where you essentially are supposed to be. And this mechanic looks more or less like this. You'll be leaping in, big slash, leap out, and then you can continue to generate and build resources. The same thing can be done with the Hunt. It also replaces the ability of the blade into the slash in order for you to be able to leap out immediately. What changes with the melee build is we're invested into Void Scarred over Annihilator, which is mostly passive and plays around the ability of Void Ray, as well as some of the basic builders and spenders, which functions passively and you don't really need to do anything about it. Void Scarred is a little bit more involved that complements the melee playstyle a little bit better. It empowers your Void Blade and Hungering Slash abilities in particular, and it also grants you a stronger version of the Hunt as well. So any of those melee skills is going to empower them whenever Metamorphosis is active. Because we are heavily invested into Metamorphosis to get more value out of Void Scarred, we were playing with the talent of Soul Glutton, which allows Metamorphosis to be ready and available a lot sooner, requiring less souls in order to be able to enter it. Your Fury Drain, however, is going to be faster while meta is active, so you're going to get more instances of meta, but the duration of that meta is going to be much shorter. So this allows you to benefit from Void Scarred a lot regularly. What's cool about this is entering Metamorphosis allows you to reset the cooldown of Void Blade and the Hunt, so you can use them pretty regularly outside of Metamorphosis. You don't have to save them, because once you enter meta, you get those abilities for free anytime, anyway. Which means you can actually do some really sick bursts as this playstyle altogether. You could follow up from a Hunt, big cleave, backflip out, charge back in, yet another cleave, back out, back into Metamorphosis, and do it all over again. Big backflip, and then more cleaves. So you can do this again and again and again, which gives you a ton of overall damage and a lot of resources too. The amount of souls you generate from that combo is kind of wild, so it allows you to start building into a potential collapsing star. But you can see the drain of Metamorphosis, it is going to be much higher. So likely you're going to need a lot more haste in order to build up the damage, start spending resources as quickly as possible. So you're probably going to be playing this build a little bit differently, but integrating those melee abilities for a quick bit of burst in between of your basic rotation, I think is going to work out in the long term if it has enough tuning. And this version of Demon Hunter actually feels kind of fun, but it does feel like the spec itself is still pretty much primarily a range spec. So if you are going to be playing like this melee hybrid version, you're not actually making the Demon Hunter melee. You're just adding more charge in, cleave, and leap out abilities into your kit. You're not able to transform the Demon Hunter too crazily. So don't expect for you to go straight up all melee-esque as the Devourer playstyle. The zoom in and zoom out abilities with those quick rushes actually feel very satisfying, and the amount of damage they do, the visuals they are able to provide, it looks really good. It definitely hits that dopamine rush. I do wish that the ability itself of Void Blade was on a shorter cooldown, however, or maybe give you multiple charges so you could use it more regularly or more aggressively, because it's really fun. But waiting for 30 seconds for it to recharge with Void Blade, or even the 1.5 minutes for the Hunt, it does take a bit of time. I don't think that they are gonna do that though. I think this is intentionally meant to be a 30-second cooldown ability, something that you do in a quick moment, and then you don't do that for a while. Because if you want to play melee Demon Hunter, you would just be playing Havoc. I think for approachability, they're probably gonna keep this spec primarily a range DPS spec with mobility while casting, and mostly focusing on range damage abilities, using those melee abilities once in a while every so often, but not necessarily making you like constantly rush in, leap out, rush in, leap out, because I imagine some players would find that mechanic completely really annoying. So it's going to be just something that you do for a short moment, but primarily you are still going to be ranged at your core. All in all, I actually am pleasantly surprised with the Devourer Demon Hunter spec. Seeing the few abilities that you were pressing as part of your basic rotation, at first had me a little bit worried because, like, how does this work? But even though you don't have that many combat abilities to press, all of them do have more depth. There's combos that you can generate, and depending on the talents that you pick up, some of those abilities do gain additional more value as part of his day-to-day combat. So there is at least a way that you can modify your builds a little bit and still will have a very fast-paced and active playstyle. You don't have downtime. You are actually constantly thinking about your next step and the next move, and the abilities that you do have, the few abilities that you do have, are still incredibly satisfying to use. And this seems like potentially this might be the direction that many other classes are going to in Midnight and maybe beyond. Classes becoming more simplified without necessarily becoming less enjoyable to play into. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like, as I would very much appreciate it. Definitely let me know in the comments what you think about the Devourer Demon Hunter spec, and which playstyle are you currently leaning towards right now, the range build or this melee hybrid build to be able to rush in, rush out, and do a bunch of damage. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.